Good evening. This is Scott Sackett. Thank you for joining me. If you've followed these, you'll know that I've been going through the book How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. This will be lesson number 4. This will be the second part of anatomy that I'm going to talk about. I've had pretty good response to these videos. If you haven't watched any of them, I would encourage you to start with lesson number 1. Generally, I do a lesson where I go through a part of the book, and then I will then do a kind of a demonstration where I talk about homework. Basically, I will give you homework at the end of this lesson, and then I will go through the homework and I'll record that so that you can see that. My contention is that this book is a excellent art book. It's kind of become overlooked over the years because it was written in the 70s, but the foundations that it's based on are still I consider them very valid. I think where this book suffers from is that it does not have a lot of lessons in it, and so I'm trying to remedy that. And I feel like if you go through the book and study the book, I feel like you will learn quite a bit of it. Now, it's been a while since I've recorded. A lot of people reached out to me. I appreciate everybody that reached out to me. I have been busy. I mentioned in the last episode that I have a comic book. The last episode that I recorded, I listened to it, and I said that my comic book had been picked up, and my comic book is in the July previews. I'm recording this July 4th, and so my comic is here, Heaven's Rejects. I did not paint this cover. This was painted by an artist named Alex Monique, I think. Alex is a female, I believe. That's the female Alex, not male Alex. But anyway, Alex Monique. And anyway, this is in the Source Point Press, or this is in this is the July previews. This is in the Source Point Press section. They gave us the opening cover, or the opening of the section, and then we got a double page spread. They have 2 covers coming out. If you want to order the book, if you enjoy these lessons, I would encourage you to ask your retailer to order these books at your local comic shop. This cover is the code is JUL221933. This is the cover B. It is JUL221934. If you order those, I would appreciate it. My only goal with doing those is that they sell well enough that the publisher will demand a sequel. Anyway, if you would do that, I'd appreciate it. If not, that's fine. That's no big deal. But anyway, and also if you take a second to subscribe to this my channel, I would appreciate it. My goal is to be able to do live streams, but I haven't got there yet. But of course, I'm about to do more videos, and I've fallen way behind, and I apologize for that. But thank you for everybody that's reached out to me and continued to view my videos. I'm going to try and get back on track now that my comic book is in previews, and we've kind of got some of the stuff done that the last minute stuff I needed to get done. So hopefully I'll be able to do more videos. I definitely want to make it my way through this entire book, because I think it's important. I'm learning a lot going through this. It's good for me, and I hope it's good for you. Okay, so if you watched all the lessons up till now, lesson 3 was we started. I think it was chapter 5. No, it's chapter 4, and I encourage you to look at these headings here and study how John Buscema put these figures together. These are great examples of what I would call like the classic Marvel style. Now this book is really drawn in what I would call like the Bronze Age style, which was when I grew up reading comics. So we went through this. I talked about proportions. I did a lot in proportions. We talked about this a little bit. We worked into our way into chapter 5. Again, here's another great John Buscema drawing. And this drawing in particular, I'm going to come back and reference. And it says, let's draw the figure. This part is dynamite. Let's not waste a second. It's written by Stan Lee. We talked about stick figures and the importance of being able to draw a stick figure. Again, when you draw a stick figure, you want to draw the masses of the 3 masses. I watched a video today that was talking about the 3 masses. The 3 important masses of figure drawing are the head, the torso, and the pelvis. By the way, when I was rewatching the video before I started recording, I made the statement, "It's not the clavicle, it's the collarbone," and I cringed when I heard myself say that, because the clavicle is the collarbone. But anyway, so we went through all this last time. So we're gonna study. We're gonna start on chapter 6 tonight, and of course it says the name of the game is action. And so all we're gonna do is take the figure drawing lessons that we talked about, and we're gonna kind of push it a little bit into more like a comic book realm. So again, we see this great figure of Prince Namor, the submariner, however you say it. But so in chapter 6, Bushima has this great illustration, and this is the idea that you want to push the pose. So again, I go back to, if you ever submit to Marvel Comics, at least back in the day when they would respond to you, they would tell you this. They would tell you, you want to capture the action at its most extreme, and this is a great example. If you purchase this book, pay attention to this and remember this. And so what you want is, you don't want your character straight up and down like this figure. And this is a punch. This is a character, he's winding up, and he's through it, and he's followed through. So what you want is, you either want the wind up, like he's getting ready to punch somebody, or you want the follow through, where he's followed all the way through. If you've ever taken any kind of martial arts course, you've probably been taught that when you punch somebody, you don't, if you're punching them and they're here, you don't punch them and stop. You punch through them. I've taken some martial arts, and I've taken some tests, and you have to break a board, and if the board's here, you don't punch to here, you punch all the way through that board, because that's the follow through. And that's what they're telling you here. You draw that follow through. And so if you see here, this character, for example, the ones that are labeled weak are kind of the mid pose, but it's pretty straight up and down. All the masses are on top of each other, or everything's in a line. Even going to something like this, or even this, like a not bad, it's still pretty straight on top of itself. But what you want is, you want this right here with that follow through. And the reason why is because that's what looks best. But what makes it look good, one of the reasons, is the gesture. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And the book doesn't talk about this a whole lot, but if you look here, you can see his leg right here almost forms like a line. And see how everything seems to be a line there? It's not on top of each other like with this. It flows. It's almost like water flowing. You can almost visualize water flowing through the body there. And so this is what you want to aim for. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot more examples like this, where it's got the whole range of motion. But this is a great example, and you should keep this in mind when you're drawing. So, and here you have, it doesn't show the thing, but it shows the gesture. Now, a gesture is not a stick figure. A gesture is just a line. They call it the line of action. It's just to get that action down. And you can see here, that's not really the stick figure. That leg doesn't really even follow that necessarily. It kind of bends a little bit, but you get that there's a strong directional feel with that. And here's some examples. Now, there are some examples in the book. I said they didn't go into a lot, but they do a little bit. And so here you see with this figure, you see there's that line, and typically the line of action will go all the way through the leg. It'll go and typically it goes down like the center of the rib cage, and then down there. And you'll notice how it's not drawn real detail. You have to kind of look to see it. But that shoulder is here, and that shoulder's there. So their sternum is actually over here. So that line of action doesn't follow the center line of the figure. But the hips are lined up this way, and the shoulders lined up this way. You don't want a figure where all of your masses are in a line. Like if you think of the like your shoulders, you don't want your shoulders lined up with your hips. You want them kind of at an angle. A twist is really good, where the pelvis kind of points one way and the upper body points another way. Now this one is fairly straight, but you get but you still get, they're on top of each other, but you get a directional pull. So the pelvis is basically pointing this way, but his upper body's kind of pointing this way if you look how his arms are. And again, you get like a long flow. The longer that line of action is, the more dynamic your figure is going to be, because you can feel that force going through the body. This is a great one. This might be like the guy may have punched this guy, but he's off balance because you can see his foot is not flat on the ground. And that's another thing. If you want your figures to look dynamic, a great tip is draw them where their feet are not flat, because when someone's feet are flat, they're standing on the ground. So if you draw them where they're on their toes, or maybe like this is guy's on his toe and he's got one foot in the air, but you see that long line there, and you see like his hips are kind of going that way and his torso is pointing up that way. If you look how his shoulders are. Again, another punch with a long. That was a kind of an uppercut. This is kind of a right cross. You know, the legs are braced way apart. I mentioned in the last lesson, not the homework, but the lesson 3, I mentioned that Jim Lee in Wizard Magazine had talked about, and I wish I could find that, but in Wizard Magazine, Jim Lee had talked about how he, when he had like a mathematical formula, not really a formula, but he tried to spread out the legs as much as possible on the figure. And drawing a figure like this will not come natural. People don't stand like this naturally. This is a very comic book thing, but that's what you want. That's what Marvel, this is how to draw comics the Marvel way encapsulated right there. Spread those legs out, twist that torso around. You know, his torso's twisted almost 90 degrees to his hips. You know, spread that arm out there. Same thing for this one, man. You know, he's kind of launching himself. That foot's in the air. It's his arm is about as far as it can be. His shoulders are almost 90 degrees to his pelvis. Again, another great action pose right there. And so then we have some comparison. This is more comparison. A guy running versus a guy running the Marvel way, if you want to think about it that way. This guy's running, but he's not really running. This guy's really running. One of the things that they'll suggest when you one of the things that was suggested to me when I was submitting was they would say, look at sports photos. And I don't know if that's much a thing anymore, because it used to be like, you know, in Sports Illustrated and that sort of thing. But sports photos are a great thing to study, because athletes are always pushing themselves as hard as they can. And that's kind of what you're trying to draw, is like that physicality. And here we see, you know, a guy that's being punched, just a regular punch. And then we see a guy that's getting punched, knocked off his feet. You know, is it extreme? Yes. Is it a little cartoony? Yes. But it's, again, this is the Marvel way. And here we see some more comparison. Now, these are not stick figures. These are more like finished figures. And this is kind of what you want to be shooting for. You know, here's the guy just standing, pointing. There's not really anything wrong with that, but it's not the Marvel way. The Marvel way, he's got his feet spread. You'll notice his feet are kind of angled out a little bit. This guy's they're angled a little bit, but not much. This is one thing that really helped me, I think, in drawing comics was taking martial arts, because in martial arts they teach you to stand with your feet spread. Maybe not quite this much, but you're always thinking about how you're standing and where you're moving when you're doing your katas and stuff. You're trying to, you know, how you hold everything. And that's kind of what this is. You know, his feet are spread out. His chest is kind of thrown back a little bit. You know, his shoulders are up. That arm is straight out. You know, he's pointing at something, or maybe shooting something out of his hand or whatever. Here you have, again, somebody, they're standing. This is a regular stance. This is the Marvel stance. Legs are apart. You know, he's got a firm base there for where he's standing, and then his chest is kind of puffed up a little bit. His hands are on his hip. They're a little bit higher than this guy's. You know, it's just a little more authority in that pose. Same thing for this one. You know, this is the normal guy. I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's punching in somewhere at a factory or whatever. This guy, and again, there's this straight, not a lot going on there. Here he's got his torso is kind of tilted back, and you can see there's an action line, and I mentioned something when in the I think it was in the homework 3. I mentioned that when you draw a stick figure, don't draw the lines like on the legs straight. And I kind of glossed over that a little quick, but if you look at a skeleton, your bones are not straight, and what that does is that allows your skeleton to absorb blows. Like if you were to jump, I don't know, like out of the back of a pickup or something, or off some steps or something, that those bones being not straight, it kind of adds a little bit of stability and a little bit of springiness to your skeleton. Not that your bones spring, but it just allows you to absorb impacts a little bit better. Okay, so here we have some pages of more poses, and again, these are kind of loose. These aren't really stick figures. They're not really constructed figures. This is kind of, I think this is kind of what you want to be doing in your preliminary drawings for your comics. Now, I'm convinced this page is printed upside down. I think I said this in the review, but if you look at it, these poses make a lot more sense this way. You know, guy's getting hit, that guy's falling, that guy's squatting, that guy's, I don't know what he's doing, falling forward, that guy's standing, that guy's flying through the air. Every version I've seen of this book, it's got them printed what I think is upside down. I don't know if anyone's ever spotted that. I should write them a letter. But anyway, but these are poses that you can copy from, and I would encourage you to copy these. Maybe make them your own a little bit. Maybe if you want to add, maybe finish them out a little bit or draw a character on top of it or whatever. But these 2 pages are gold. You should copy these pages. And like I said, you can do them with your own figures or however you want to do that. And then here we have some progress shots, and this is another thing that is the great thing about the book. So here we have, it starts off with a basically it's a gesture, not really even a skeleton, it's a gesture, and then they kind of draw it as a mannequin figure. And I talked about that quite a bit in the last episode, how to get there. And again, you can see this is not a straight up and down pose. And I would encourage you, when you're doing your homework on this, when you're drawing your figures, that you get out of the mode of drawing figures straight up and down and you start drawing them in poses, even if it's a pose like this. And what's great about this pose versus something that's straight up and down, I'll find something in my sketchbook that's straight up and down. Even though a straight up and down pose, oh, here we go. I didn't finish this one, but see, I mean, a straight up and down pose like this is good practice, but you really want to get to where you're drawing like this. And so what makes this pose so good is the pelvis is twisted one way, the torso's twisted another way. He's kind of cocked over a little bit. His feet are not in a line. There's a little bit of perspective here, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit. Perspective is another subject like anatomy that there's a lot of books out, but I want to talk about it just a little bit to kind of give you a little bit of grounding so you can do some of this stuff. And so then now they've taken that and they've kind of started with the basic lines of the costume, and then they've got it. This is pretty much drawn, but then they've gone in here and added the shading, the rendering. And so this is a good example. And there's a couple more in here. There's a Spider-Man that they go through and do the same thing. And this gives you a great progression. Now this one isn't numbered, but it's here, 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 and then here. And that's what you need to do. Start doing this in your sketchbook. Even if you don't get to here, do this. This is, but you should go to here. It takes a little more time, but fill your sketchbook with figures that are fully rendered like that. I think we're at that point. And so here's some examples from comics. And so you can look in the comics and you can see, like, it sometimes it's hard to see what's going on. So they have this broken down so you can see, like, there's the guy, he's punching this character and they've got it broken down kind of into the skeleton figure. There's Karnak, and again, it's great. You can see that how he's got his feet spread out. The Black Panther, I think that's Giant Man. Lots of Giant Man. There's another Giant Man, climbing. Magneto and Susan Storm right there. Spider-Man falling off of something or another. Okay. We're going to talk about foreshortening just a little bit. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I want to go into a little bit of detail. And there's going to be I'm going to go through their thing, and then I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I'll give you some homework to work on. And then I'll come back in a couple days and do a homework video, okay? And again, this is they picked a great example for the foreshortening thing, because here you can see. Now, foreshortening, if you're unfamiliar with it, is just the idea. This is normal. Foreshortening is like this, where it's coming towards the camera, with your eye being the camera, or the viewer in this case, I guess. And so here you see foreshortening in action there. So foreshortening is something that stumps a lot of people, but it's not impossible to learn, but it'll take a little bit of practice on your part. And so now's the time when you're to practice some of that, because it'll creep if you don't. The only way to avoid it is to draw perfectly flat characters. So what'll help your foreshortening, when you get stuck, go back to your mannequin figure. Now these are drawn really boxy, and that's okay, because what it does is it allows you to see it as it should be in perspective. So and I'll talk a little bit about perspective just briefly. Let me get some paper and do a little drawing. So what you need to know at this point for perspective is you need to know that everything is on a horizon line. Okay, and or an eye line, if you don't think of that. So if you're looking out, we'll say you're at the ocean, and you look out and you see way out across the water, where the water ends and the sky starts, that is the horizon line. So when you're drawing somebody, now the important thing to remember about the horizon line is everything above it you can see the bottom of, and everything below it you can see the top. Okay, so for example, if I'm eyeballing this, we'll say I have a block of wood. It's below the horizon line, so I'm seeing the top. This one is above the horizon line, so I can see the bottom, right? And the closer you get to the horizon line, the less apparent that becomes. So for example, we'll say this is, I'll draw right there. So this would be more like this. It'd be almost flat. You wouldn't see much of it. You'll see, as you move away, you see more and more. Like up here, you might see like this much. And I'll talk about this more in perspective, but you need to keep that in mind, because how that affects the figure drawing is, if you have a figure, I'm drawing somebody just real quick here. And say they're running towards you, or jumping, or whatever. Okay, say you have this figure, and say the horizon line's hitting them right there. So, and say they're wearing a costume. So their belt might have a little bit of curve to it, like that. Okay, but say they've got like kind of shorts on. We'll say they're kind of long. It's not like longer trunks. That line, this is a better one because it's straight up and down. This line would kind of curve this way again, because it's like this. You know, think of it, if it's a cylinder. That's probably a better example. You can see the bottom if it's above, and the top if it's below. So that curve is emulated in any kind of detail on the costume. Now, of course, this would be a little bit different because it's pointing this way, so it would follow that. You know, but that, where it's at on the horizon, should impact, like a neck would be a little bit different because it's leaning forward. But that horizon, where it's in the horizon, influences that. Okay, just a little bit. So that's not really a foreshortening thing, but that's drawing the figure in perspective. So going back to the foreshortening thing, what you want to do when you're drawing a figure and you want it in foreshortening, say you want to draw a guy that's like flying through the air at you, similar to that Nick Fury thing. So you may draw like a box for his torso, and then you want to draw like this might be his upper arm, this might be his lower arm, this might be his hands. And say he's kind of going off this way. So this one you might see a little bit more. You see this. So his neck is right there. So maybe his head is down. And then maybe he's got a knee straight down. So that's kind of how you might want to draw that. But practicing it, what you want to think about is your cylinder. So this cylinder here for like his upper arm, I didn't draw all of it, but in my mind, I was thinking about it like a cylinder. So what you do to help solve that is you draw through. You draw it like everything's made of glass, And the rule of thumb is if it looks right, it is right. Now, I'm going to show you a couple comics that I'm working on right now. This is the classic Daredevil. So this is a panel that I drew, and when I got done, I decided this guy was a little too large and her fist was a little big for the way her arm was. And so I redrew that panel. It's a little better, and I don't like her shoe. I'm gonna work on her shoe, but I redrew that panel because I felt like her fist shouldn't be that big for not having more overlap. Those cylinders don't overlap very much, so I made her fist too big, and then I made him way too big, considering that his knee is behind her fist. So this it's not behind her fist in this one, but I drew him a little smaller, and I feel like the proportions work out. The foreshortening works better on that, and so that's kind of a little bit of getting your feet wet on foreshortening. And this is what you need to study here. So they got the figure that it's boxed out, and it's got and you can see now if you're drawing this, I would suggest drawing the entire box. Don't just draw, and I didn't do it when I drew mine, but don't just draw like here's a box for the chest. Go ahead and draw it. You can draw it lighter than this, but go ahead and draw all the, if you're having trouble especially, draw all that. But you can see, now here's a good example of what I was talking about with the perspective. So if you want it to look like this guy's jumping in the air, see how you can see the bottom of all these boxes? That makes it look like it's up. See, this one's the opposite. See, we're looking at the top of the boxes, so this is down. So the horizon's like up here somewhere. So this guy's laying on the ground. This guy's jumping maybe rooftop to rooftop. This is same for this guy laying. And in fact, really a good example is these two because they're both flying. It's almost the same pose, just reversed. We're looking down on this guy and up at this guy. And that's why, because that box making that torso is the top versus the bottom. So here's some examples of foreshortening in the from the comics. They've taken the comic panel and then broken it down into boxes. And again, this is very helpful, and this is stuff you should copy. This one I really like because the guy's got that gun, and it's probably, what's funny is like here he didn't draw it quite that there. The hand is really exaggerated, and he didn't quite, when he drew his, he didn't quite exaggerate it that much. But this is a good example. All these are good examples, but that's a particularly good example. Even this, it's a static pose, but because we've got the bottom of the box drawn, you're looking up at him, and so it's kind of still kind of got some action to it because of the way that it's posed. And again, it's a little exaggerated from that even, but same thing for Black Panther. He's looking up, and here they went ahead and drew the whole figure, and Dracula. jumping. That's a good jumping pose. Another thing to remember when you're drawing these, if you're drawing the torso tilted forward, the neck comes out of, it sounds crazy, but the neck comes out of the top of the body. So your neck comes up to the bottom of your skull, like here. That's a good, you can kind of see it there. But your neck, so if you could see his neck in this, it wouldn't be right, because the pit of his neck, or the hole his neck comes out, is covered by his skull. Here's a few more. This is a good one. Again, laying on the ground. We're looking at the tops of the boxes. It's John. No, that's Living Laser. Living Laser, but it's an upshot. So everything we're looking at is the bottom of the boxes. The thing, he's leaning that way, so those boxes that he's constructed out of are pointed towards us. And this guy's, I don't know, he's diving for something or whatever, hanging on to something maybe. Again, we're looking, he's basically above us. Anyway, okay, that's what I'm gonna stop there. Thank you for joining me. I'll do a homework in a couple days. Thank you for sticking with this. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's reached out to me and asked me to continue doing this. I will continue doing it. I want to get all the way through it. It's going to take me a little bit, I'll be honest with you. But when we get towards the end, it'll go quicker. But the anatomy stuff is real important. So, anyway, so I hope that you'll, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and hit the bell and get notification when I do new videos. Leave a comment. I love reading comments. I've tried to answer all the comments. If you left a comment I didn't answer or respond, I apologize. But that lets me know that people are actually watching these things. Anyway, thank you very much. Again, if you're interested, if you have a local comic shop, please ask them to order Heaven's Rejects for you from Source Point Press. I would really appreciate that. Would really help me out. Anyway, thank you very much. Have a good evening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.